I told God this was my last time when I know it ain't my last time, but I'm praying.
Man, what is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sports Bliss and Politics. My name is AJ Sharp, and I have to start this video off the same way I started the last one off. I have to give a big thank you to everyone who has showed me so much support, whether it's like, comments, views, words of encouragement, words of support. I really can't explain to you guys how much it has meant to me, and I just wanted to take this time again to thank you all so much. Now, this video is part 2 of the series of me telling my story about what happened that night at the Rialto. And if you guys can remember from the last video, part 1, we left off at my defense attorney and the assistant district attorney giving arguments to the judge as to why I should get bond and why I shouldn't get bond. Now, if you guys remember where we left off at, you'll remember the things that were being said about me by the assistant district attorney on the case. And it kind of goes without being said that my bond was ultimately denied. And we would find out later that the judge had told the assistant district attorney assigned to my case, Katie Ranker, that her mind was already made up that she was going to deny my bond before the hearing even started. Now, one of the things that I feel is important to mention about this judge, Judge Flanagan, is that she has a daughter that is the same age as Nico Williams, the brother of the alleged victim in my case, an individual who testified that day at my hearing. And her daughter is the same age, like I said, was in the same class as him, K through 12, and she knows this family well. And she sat through my case, and I believe that is a huge reason as to why my bond was denied and why she honestly said before the case or before the hearing that her mind was already made up in denying my bond. She told the assistant district attorney that. The assistant district attorney ultimately told my attorney, who told my family and I. You know, I remember whenever the judge was deciding whether she was going to deny my bond or not, or deciding, making it seem as if she was making a fair decision, but ultimately she wasn't. But she was sitting there, and each word she said, we were just hanging on each word she was saying. And then ultimately she said she's going to deny my bond again. And I just remember hearing the cries from my family and my friends, and just the blow just the realization that I'm going to be going back in jail indefinitely, realistically. And I had no idea when I would get the chance to try and get bond again. And, you know, the courtroom was packed with so many friends and so many family members that that there wasn't even enough seats for people in there. And just the cries that went out, and seeing all my family members crying, all my friends crying. And, you know, there was a security guard that we knew, God bless his soul. And this is kind of a theme too that I want to point out. You know, I ultimately believe that I went through this for a reason. And some of the reasons why is that, you know, I don't mean to get spiritual, but I believe God placed these people throughout the duration of my case to help keep me going. And one of these people, there was 2 people at my preliminary hearing. You heard about the CO in the first video, and at the preliminary hearing, it was a security guard. And this security guard allowed my family to come over and give me hugs. And, you know, that was so refreshing, just being able to hug my friends and my family. And even though as hard as it was, seeing all of them, you know, crying and coming up and hugging me, it was refreshing at the same time too, because I haven't been able to contact any of these people in person for a week now since it happened. Talking over the phone in jail a little bit here and there, but, you know, it's not the same as that in-person physical connection, that, you know, in-person interaction. It's just not the same. And having that brief moment, him allowing me to hug all the family and friends, and I mean, there was a lot of them, it just meant a lot. And after that, they took me back to the room, the holding room, while I waited to ultimately go back to jail. And there was another person that came in, and I played basketball with this individual. I'm not going to say his name. If you're listening, you know who you are. But he came in and he shut the door. Had an internship at the courthouse, I believe. And he went to UPG, and he came in and he told me, University of Pitt at Greensburg. And he told me, just hang in there. He just came in, gave me a hug. He was like, listen, you'll be okay. You're going to have your chances. This is very early in the process. Just he shared with me that he himself went through something, that he made it out. He was fine, and he believed that, ultimately that I would make it out as well. And hearing that, it just meant the world, because he didn't have to do that. I didn't know him extremely well, but he took the time to come in and say those things to me, and that helped. So they put me and a couple other inmates back in the van to take us back to the county jail. And I remember just getting in my cell, and it still didn't fully hit me. It hit me, trust me, but the real gravity of it didn't hit me immediately. I went back to my cell. Every inmate is allowed access to a tablet, and that's how I was able to communicate with everybody on the outside. So I was able to call my parents from this tablet, text my friends, and things of that nature, but it really hit me at 9 o'clock. So my day was long. I got up real early to go to this hearing. So I was up at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and they take your tablets at 9 o'clock. So I just told myself, I'm going to talk to my family members. As soon as 9 o'clock hits, they take the tablet. I'm going to go to sleep so that I'm not stuck thinking about this in this cell with really nothing to do but sit with my thoughts. I told myself I'm going to go to sleep, and next morning I'll be able to wake up and at least have some sort of distraction. So 9 o'clock comes, CO comes, takes my tablet. I lay down, turn the lights out, and that's exactly what I do. I fell asleep. But then I remember waking up, getting out of my bed, and from my cell door, there's a clock hanging on the wall that I can see, like a little digital clock. And I remember looking up at the clock, and it was a little bit past 12. And I just remember being like, "Oh, I'm in for a long night." I just knew it was going to be hard. And it was. Minutes felt like days. And that is when I really just broke down, because I'm really realizing that I'm in jail indefinitely. To me, it seemed as if I wasn't going to get out until my case was over, because that's the reality for a lot of inmates. And just how the case was progressing, that seemed like that would be my future as well. I remember just pacing back and forth in my cell, just breaking down, and it was just the hardest night of my life, and just waiting for 6 o'clock the next morning, 7 o'clock, whatever time it was, that I'd be able to go back and get this tablet and talk to some people, talk to my friends and family, just to salvage whatever little bit of comfort I can. And I remember the next morning getting my tablet, calling my parents, and when they answered, I couldn't even talk. I was just so emotional that I couldn't even speak. I just wanted to sit on the phone with them and just try and comfort myself any way I can. So keep in mind, I'm still in the quarantine block of the jail. Excuse me. And I know that the next step for me was to go to the big block, my actual block I'd have a cellie, I'd be with other inmates with like charges, and that would be 3 days from when my preliminary hearing is, because my preliminary hearing was 7 days after the event took place, and you stay in quarantine for 10 days, and then you move to the big block. And that's what I did. That was the next step. I moved to the big block, and I remember just being scared, really, because I didn't know what to expect. I know I'm not in, and thank goodness, I wasn't in a jail like Allegheny County or a county jail of like Philadelphia or somewhere like that. But still, at the end of the day, I'm still in jail. And I remember just being so scared and nervous about going to this block. And the day came to where I transitioned into the big block. And I remember getting in there and just I walk in, and there's 70 other inmates. They're all out playing cards, watching TV, chess, poker, doing each other's hair, whatever they do on a day-to-day basis to get through the day realistically. And I get to my cell, I meet my cellie, and I was lucky enough that my cellie was super cool. I get in my cell, get myself situated, and I'm kind of walking around the block. Just now I can move freely because while I was in quarantine, I only had an hour of rec times where you're allowed out of your cell to move around the block and do as you please. And that's what I was doing. I was kind of just moving around, getting comfortable, seeing what's all around, checking out my surroundings. And there's this one guy for the first 2 days, he was just looking at me. This big black dude. He was about 6'3", 250 pounds. And I was nervous. I was a little scared. And on that second day, I'm sitting in my cell. I was reading a book or something. And he comes in, or comes to the entrance of my cell door. And he's like, "Yo, are you AJ?" And I'm like, "Why? Why you want to know?" And he's like, "Are you AJ?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he's like, "Oh, my name's so-and-so." I'm not going to say his name. But it turns out one of my boys called in and told him "Hey, keep an eye out for my friend. He might be coming into your block. Just keep an eye out for him." And that's what he did. He came up to me. He was like, "Your boy called out and told me to keep an eye out for you." He gave me some soup, some chips. He was like, "Here's this until you can order your commissary for the week. If you need anything, just let me know." And that kind of just plays into the theme I told you guys about these people that were inserted at certain points throughout my case to keep me going. And this is one of the individuals that I believe were placed in my life to help keep me going. The next steps in my case would be to try and get me bond. Now I moved to my trial judge, Judge Feliciani, awesome judge. And my attorneys put in a motion for me to have a bond hearing now with the trial judge. So that was the next step for me. That was my next thing. But, while I was in jail, I was still being harassed. And it was unbeknownst to my knowledge until I moved into this cell. So I'm in there one night and I get strip searched randomly. They just do it randomly to people, inmates, try and find contraband, whatever the case may be. And I'll get strip searched and in the middle of the night, whatever. And then I get searched again a couple nights or a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever the case may be. And my cellie says to me, he says, "Man, you're super unlucky." And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Because I've been in jail for a year now and I've only been strip searched once. You've been searched twice since you got in here." And that's when I realized that, this is probably coordinated because why am I out of everybody getting searched this much? There wasn't anyone else on the block getting searched like that twice in the span of a month. And I got searched while I was in quarantine too. So 3 times. It's unreasonable. And then we find out that there was a CO that was connected to his family. And we believe that's why I was getting searched so much. But, no concrete evidence behind that. But that's my belief as to why. Because there's really no other reason for that. And, these searches are invasive. Come in, make you get out of bed, make me take all my clothes off, strip naked. And they search, my person. They search my belongings and things of that nature. And it's just invasive and just so degrading as a human to be treated in that manner. But, I want to fast forward to my bond hearing. If you guys have any questions about, jail or my time in jail, leave those in the comments or shoot me direct messages. I'd love to have maybe a Q&A at the end as a kind of like a recap to this series, kind of answer some questions that you guys still have left about, what happened. But to fast forward to my bond hearing, the whole goal was getting me bond and to hopefully get me out of jail before Christmas. Because this happened November of 2022. We're now creeping into December. And I just remember trying so hard to get me home before Christmas. So bond hearing day comes. and I have a new attorney now. They take me to this holding cell that's underneath the courthouse, and I'm in there with like 3 other inmates. It's in this tiny cell. And I remember that's the first time I got to meet my new attorney, and I was like, knew we had the right one. As soon as I met him, I knew we had the right one. And I get up to the court, and my hearing starts to take underway. And the victim's family has so many people there. But I don't think they understand or understood that there's other cases being heard. This isn't like the preliminary hearing where Judge Flanagan was just hearing my case and maybe there's some time in between until she hears the next case, or I might be the only case she hears that day. But the courtroom was packed with these people, and the judge was not happy about this at all because they took up the whole courtroom. But it actually ended up helping because they're making arguments for bond, and she's saying the same things that she said in the first hearing. But this time the judge was asking questions to really gain an understanding as to what happened in this case. And he asked, well, who started the fight? And my attorney kind of looks at me, and he doesn't want to give up anything yet. It's too early. He doesn't want to put anything on record yet that might come back to hurt him. So he kind of passes it over to the prosecution. And the judge is like, well, the victim's here, isn't he? The prosecutor says yes. And he says, well, go ask him. As well as other witnesses from my case were there too. So she says, okay. I remember her leaving the stand, going back into the seats to talk to the alleged victim and some of the witnesses. And she probably went back there for 30, 40 seconds, but it felt like 5 minutes, honestly. And that courtroom was so quiet. It was so quiet, it was deafening. And she's going back there and she's talking to them, and she gets up to the mic and she says, the victim and the witnesses don't remember who started the fight. And that was huge because now that's on record. They can't go back later saying that I started the fight, or if they did, it'd be really hard for them to do that because they had their opportunity to say that I started the fight, and that's what they were trying to run with, that I started this whole altercation. But now they're on, now they had their opportunity to say that, and they didn't. They couldn't find themselves to lie. And that ultimately would lead to me getting bond. And I got bond for what I believe is an unfair amount, $250,000 bond. But I got bond. At this point, I know I am going to be able to go home and fight this case from home. I won't be fighting this case from jail. And that really, it was a win. It was a first win in what felt like I would never receive one anytime soon. He grants me my bond. I'm happy. I leave, go back to the holding cell, eventually go back to jail. A couple weeks later, I end up getting out 2 days, I believe, before Christmas it was. And that getting out of jail, I remember, I didn't have any clothes, so I went back in that makeshift mesh suit that they put me in while entering the jail. And I remember walking out, and my family was in the car waiting for me. And I remember just getting in the car and them just hugging me. And I remember turning my phone on for the first time in a month and just seeing all the messages, some good, some bad, mostly good though. And just feeling relieved. But it still wasn't as much of a relief as I thought it would be, because the conditions of my bond were that I'd be on house arrest, so I had an ankle monitor, and that I would also take these breathalyzers twice a day. So I took one in the morning. It was a little handheld breathalyzer I'd have to take because I wasn't allowed to drink, because the prosecutor was making some strong stance that if I drink, that I can become a threat and a danger to the community again, that I might go off the rails after drinking and go and try and hurt the family, everything that they were saying in the preliminary hearing. So I was still restricted very heavily. So getting out, the first month or two just kind of felt like a transitioning period still. Still, you you want to believe that this isn't going on cuz I'm home. I'm with my loved ones, but it's still just hanging over your head. And I remember this is I just the hole I started to put myself in just mentally, and the anxiety and the depression that really just came with it. Cuz now I'm out and I'm able to see all the things that people are saying about me, all the articles, all the comments, the Facebook shares, the Facebook comments, and I'm able to start seeing all of this, and that just it really just messed with my mental more than I can say. And it just took such a big hit on me, and it stuck with me. And I mean, really, I've just been recently getting out of that rut. And at this time period is when I started receiving these text messages, just these harassing text messages, racial slurs, calling me the hard R, called a monkey stabber, just another N word, like crazy things just being sent to my phone. And of course, the attorney advises that we file a report, go to the police, file a report. And of course, there's nothing that they can do about it. And I find that so hard to believe, because let that be messages of someone sending something of criminal value that they find interesting. I guarantee they could find out who's sending those messages then, but they just didn't have a care to figure out who was sending me these messages at the time. And I still don't know who's sending me these messages, and they still send me these messages to this day. Fake Instagrams, fake numbers, a lot of fake numbers, and you try not to let it affect you, but at the end of the day, it does. So fast forward a couple months, I wake up and I was constantly checking the Trib. That was just my new favorite thing to do, because they were writing articles about the case sporadically here and there. And I checked the Trib one morning, a few months after I'm out, and I see that the Joey is suing the Rialto. And I call my attorney, and he's like, listen, you're probably going to get joined in the case as well as a defendant. So Joey would be suing me as well as the bar. And that's exactly what happened. I would end up being joined in the case, and I would be getting sued for the amount, I think it was $650,000 is what I was being sued for, me and the bar. And that was just a whole another bombshell dropped onto me, because it's just like, now I got to fight this criminal case and I got to fight this civil case, and it's just so much more stress added to not only myself but my family members as well, because now we have to hire a civil attorney to fight this case, and it was just so much, and it was just a hard period in time, and we're still waiting for this first round of evidence to come in. We're waiting for discovery, and around April is when we got the first round of discovery, and it wasn't really much. It was just a bunch of summaries of interviews that the police held. It wasn't actual videos. There wasn't really anything to go off of, and that was a blow, because I'm waiting for these videos because I know what happened, and I'm telling everybody what happened, but obviously until we get all of the evidence, my attorney really can't do anything. But in this same month of April, this is when my child was born. My child was born April 26th of 2023, and I was blessed to have a very awesome parole officer that allowed me to be in the hospital for the birth of my child. And I remember being there and Kyler, my child, being born, and it just changes your perspective on things, the gravity of my situation, everything just changed. It just made it so much harder, but at the same time too, her being there made things so much easier as well. It gave me so much more hope, so much more strength to fight. And I realized at that point that this life is what, if there's nothing else I'm fighting for her at the end of the day. And that just built my will up more than anything else throughout this entire process. After the birth of my child, I'm still on house arrest. That allowed me to spend so much time with her, though, at the same time. And there was really no movement in my case for some months. We're still waiting on discovery. And it got to a point where my attorney had to threaten to file a motion to compel, because it's now reaching the point where there's no excuse as to why we shouldn't have more discovery for this case, whether it be the videos of the interviews, video from the Rialto, his medical records, things of that nature. So fast forward to August of 2023, we finally get discovery. And it was early August. We get the discovery. We get his medical records. We get some interview videos. And as soon as we get that batch of discovery, my attorney called me. He said, I'm setting up a hearing for you to get off of house arrest, because as this evidence trickles in, our case is getting stronger and stronger, because the evidence is just supporting my claims more and more. And one of the most crucial pieces of evidence we received was his medical records. And his medical records showed that his BAC was a .208. No one mentioned that in the last video, but his BAC was so high. And he's like, our whole strategy was, I was trying to start school again that fall, because I tried to continue my education when I first got out, but I just wasn't in the space to do that. And I was failing classes because I just couldn't keep up with my work, because I just wasn't in the mental space to do it. But he's like, go back to school. And I remember him talking to the dean of students at Carlo, Dr. Phillips, bless him. And he worked so hard to allow Carlo to let me back on campus to attend classes so that I can finish. And ultimately, all of that would help for me to get let off of house arrest. And I remember being at the hearing, and my attorney doesn't want to talk about evidence during this. It's just not the time, not the place for it. But the prosecutor is saying these things, that I was drunk, and that if I get drunk again, that I may do this, that, and the third. And I remember my attorney looking at me as she's mentioning, the threats of me when I drink. But now we have his BAC and what his BAC was. And he said, listen, Your Honor, all these claims about, AJ being so intoxicated that he couldn't control himself, it's just not true. Because in that wave of evidence, we also got my interrogation video. And I was completely lucid. I wasn't slurring my words. I wasn't visibly drunk. You can tell that I was sober. But what you could tell is that Joey was completely drunk. And he told the judge Joey's BAC, and his face, he turned over and looked at the prosecutor, and her face just turned beet red. And he was like, a .208? He reiterated it, and was like, ultimately then he was like, I think I'm gonna allow him to get off of house arrest. And I got off of house arrest, and I remember it was just another victory. And slowly stacking these victories in this long case was so important. And I remember getting off of house arrest and going and eating with my family, going to a restaurant and getting something to eat. I still couldn't drink. I had a curfew of 9 p.m. So I had to take these breathalyzers and stuff like that. But it was still just that much closer to freedom. So this takes us, so we're in August of 2023 still. And we have this wave of evidence, and then we finally get surveillance from the bar as well. That would happen a little bit after I was released off of house arrest. We got video surveillance from the bar. And at this point, we were able to see that my claims were supported, that I didn't follow him outside, that I went back upstairs to go get my shoe. And you can visibly see that Joey had left the bar about 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes before I did. So that made it clear that he waited for me outside to continue this altercation. Not only that, you could see my mannerisms and how I was acting. I was walking, joking with friends, and I was on my phone. I wasn't carrying this knife out looking for Joey so I can stab him like how they were claiming I was. It just wasn't the case. And at this point my attorney was like, let's go. Like, I'm ready to go to trial. I'm ready to litigate this. So I say, let's do it, man. So he puts us on the trial list, and we're about 23rd on the list. So there's 22 cases in front of me that have first dibs on trial, to speak simply. And this takes a long time. So we get to April of 2024, because that's how long this took. And we're close. We're top 5 for trial. And I remember we were in a pretrial conference with the judge, and he's, saying, you guys still ready for trial? We're like, yes. But my attorney got the impression from the ADA, from something she said, that she would be willing to negotiate a plea deal that would ultimately allow me to plead guilty to charges that weren't felonies, and I wouldn't do any jail time. So he took us off the trial list so that we can think about if this is what I wanted to do. And there was a lot of hard times throughout this case. There was a lot of highs. There were lots of lows, lots of lows, but this was probably the lowest and the hardest time, because I had to make a decision if I was going to take realistically the easy way out, the safe way out, and plead guilty to these charges that I know I didn't do, but at the end of the day are lesser than attempted murder and aggravated assault, 2 F1 felonies that could plant me in jail for, I think the guidelines were 10 to 20 years. And it was such a hard decision, especially now with the child. And I remember one night, because I had to make a decision the next day. I had about a week to make this decision. And the night before, I had to, call my attorney and tell him what decision I made. I remember that being the hardest night of my life. I remember just sitting down here in the basement of my house, just pacing and just crying. And I was so scared, because I'm thinking at the end of the day of my child. What if I take this to trial, and what if I get found guilty and now I miss the first 10 years of her life when I could have been there for it? And that period of time really was so close to breaking me. And I remember talking to all my family members and my friends and just asking them what I can do or what I should do. And some people are saying, take the plea. You have a daughter now. You have to think about her. You have to be there in her life. And then there was other people who were like, dude, we know what happened. We believe in your case and your story. Fight this. Free yourself, vindicate yourself of these allegations. And I just didn't know what to do. And I remember talking to my advisor. We would talk so much, my advisor from school. And she told me, she said, listen, AJ, you have to make the decision for yourself. Don't make the decision for Kyler. Don't make the decision for your family. Make the decision for yourself. Because at the end of the day, I'm the one that's going to have to live with this decision. And that night, I was just lost. I didn't know. I had no clue what I was going to do. And I was scrolling on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And I came across this quote from Malcolm X. It sounds corny, but it really helped me out. It says, "Man who stands for nothing will fall for anything." And I thought to myself, what kind of man would I be if I don't stand for what I believe in and fight for what I believe is the truth? Fight for the truth, ultimately, not even what I believe in, what is the truth. And so I made that decision. I called my attorney the next day. I called him, I said, "Steve, how confident are you in our case?" He said, "I can't make you any promises, but AJ, I'm damn confident." I said, "Okay, let's do it. Let's go to trial." That month, we go in front of the judge, and he says, we tell him, we're going to trial. We get back on the trial list. I'm still top 3. We notice that I'd probably be going to trial in June, and that's what it turned out to be. June comes, or end of May comes. I graduate college. I get my degree, despite everything I was going through. And that moment in itself was just another unexplainable moment. I was so proud of myself because, everything I had to go through to be able to, get my degree and stand on top of it all. It was such a proud moment for myself, and gearing up to go to trial in a couple weeks, it was such an emotional time. And I remember getting ready to go to trial. We're about the weekend before trial, and I receive a call from my attorney, and he's like, "You won't believe this," and he's snapping. And I'm scared because I'm like, what, like, what's going on? And he's like, he's cussing, he's losing it. He's like, "These dudes." So turns out they withheld Joey's interrogation video, or interview, I should say, not interrogation, but they withheld his interview video. And in this interview, Joey admits to starting the fight inside the Rialto, which is huge, huge. And he also admits that he headbutted me so hard that he believes he knocked himself out or blacked out. So therefore, he doesn't remember anything that happens after he headbutted me. And that's huge. And what he also disclosed, that the prosecutor, and the lead detective on my case, he discloses that he has personal ties to the alleged victim, that he used to coach wrestling with the father, and that he also has connections with one of the witnesses who would testify in my case, that he was the head scout for Boy Scout with her brother, and was connected to the family, basically. And this is huge because, to me, I was questioning, like, does this mean we have to postpone trial and wait another 2 months to get this over with? And he's like, "This is awesome. Like, listen, this just goes to show how these guys have been trying to bury you throughout this whole process. They're not disclosing things that they should disclose. These these connections that they have with the witnesses and the alleged victim, it just goes to show the bias that they had in your case, and how realistically you didn't stand a chance from the jump, because they were just worried about burying you because they were so closely connected to these people that they didn't want to hear my side of the story. They didn't want to entertain the fact that I just might be innocent." And that was huge. So after that, we get to trial.